Welcome to Introducing Input Binding. A little note on these slides. I've changed the version number of Unreal that I'm using to the top right of the slides because it was conflicting with the Udemy's new overlay they put down the bottom right. I've also removed the last digit because changes in the last digit in the 4.10.2, 4.10.3 don't really matter. So you just need to make sure if you're watching this well after 4.10 is out, that you're aware that I'm on 4.10 and that may change things. You can always install previous versions in the Epic Games Launcher. So in this video, we are going to look into settings, project settings, engine input. We're going to explain that action mappings are used for on-off actions and that axis mappings are used for analog values like sticks or steering wheels or rudder pedals. That you can give players a way of remapping their keys. We're not going to show you how to do that right now, but I just want to bear in mind it can be player remappable, just like when you configure your controls in a game. And many keys combine to one action, which is useful. And then how to call a function on a key press or release. So that's it. Really, by the end of it, we're going to be in a very simple situation where you can click, say, the right mouse button, and you'll see grab pressed like that coming up in the output log. Okay, let's dive in. So let's take a look at this input component issue then. Firstly, what is this input component and where is it? Well, firstly, I'll answer the first question first, I think. If we go to the class viewer, sorry, those Mac users currently can't get to things that aren't in the actors class, but if we look for input component, you can see here that we have actor component, input component is a inherited from actor component. Okay, so it's just another actor component. And if we play the game and then inspect the default pawn that comes up, you'll find that at runtime, we have this thing here, pawn input component. You can hover over it in the Details tab, and you can read all about it. You can also do Control and Alt, and it'll tell you more stuff. So do have a little read of that. You're welcome to pause the video now and do that if you like. It may not all make sense to you. But if we stop it playing and then have a look at the, well, you can't stop it playing and look at the default pawn because he's not there. But what you can do is look at the default pawn blueprint. You'll notice it's actually not here. This input component comes into play at runtime. Okay? So we need to go find that. It's going to end up against the pawn, just like the physics handle or the grabber. Look, let's see again at runtime. We run, we inspect the default pawn that's instantiated. Oops, we don't click on Marketplace. And then you go to Details, and you can see that you've got the grabber and the physics handle, but you've got this new pawn input component, which is just of type uInput component. So what I want you to do before we go any further is go ahead and find that component, just like we did previously with the physics handle. Find the input component, create an appropriate private member, check for the component, as we did with the physics handle. Log a similarly helpful error if it's not attached. By the way, you could be using assert here rather than errors. We'll cover assert shortly in the course, probably in the next section, just to keep the number of concepts down. But yes, assert, if you're more advanced, is another way of doing things. Don't bother trying to remove the component to test this time. It's not easy to stop that input component coming on the pawn at runtime. So don't bother trying to remove it, but just make sure that you've got all your error code there. And when it actually does find the input component, we are going to write code in that top part of the if statement. You know, in the physics handle, we just wrote a comment saying, well, you know, we've got the physics handle, yippee, but we don't need to do anything right now. Well, in this case, with the input component, just pop me another log entry in, perhaps just to say physics, input component found, and then we'll replace that later on with the actual input code. So go ahead, pause the video, at least find the input component for me. Cool, welcome back. So let's go take a little look at this thing over in Visual Studio. We're going to do something almost identical to what we did before with the physics handle. We're going to say U because that's the name of classes that are component types. Then we're going to start looking for something like input, and we find uInput component. Wicked. It's a pointer again. Input component equals null. Pointer.
Again, for those of you using a newer engine version, you're going to have to include a header for uInput component. Now, as a little tiny mini challenge, you can go and find what that is. So pause the video, search for uInput component, and have a look and see if you can find the header. It's usually at the bottom of the documentation page on Unreal. Now, welcome back if you did pause the video, and for those of you who are too impatient to pause the video, you can find the header at the bottom of the screen as usual, and it is components/input component.h. Go and include that, and you should be golden.
Okay, so we don't need to comment that again, I don't think, because look, it couldn't be a lot. It's self-commenting, self-documenting. It's just don't comment it. Okay, so what next? Now we're going to go and into the actual implementation file and go ahead, not in the engine, in the games, and go ahead and actually do some stuff with it, find it. We're going to do it in the start again, and we're going to have code that is very similar to this. So I'm actually going to copy the look for attached physics handle, and I'm going to say look for attached input components. Only appears at runtime. Okay, so we're going to say input component equals get owner find component by class, but u input component. Okay, so if input component, that's why this is hopefully a good exercise because it's just like the last one, then we do something. Well, we're going to log to say that we've got it. I'm going to get rid of most of this stuff at the end and just simply say input component found. That'll do. And it's not an error. We can put it as a warning just so we can see it. We'll start using other types of log at some point just to make life clearer, but this is working for now. This is reinforcing the way we're using logs. But as soon as it gets boring, don't worry, I'll change the locks on you and make it different again. So what are we missing? We're not missing the physics handle component, we're missing the input component. So that's all we need to do. It's very, very similar to what's above. It's just modified for the input component. Let's just test this. So over in Unreal, let's just compile and run, and we should see a yellow log saying input component found if all is well. Let's see what happens. Compiling, compiling, compiling. Taking a little longer than usual because I've actually, between videos, done a clear out just because I wanted to practice something. Okay, so let's take a little look. It says here, I don't know why I'm moving the screen around, it says input component found there, which is great news. So with the input component found, it's time to start processing the input. Let's start by going to Settings and Project Settings, and then Input under Engine. So Settings, Project Settings, and then under the Engine section, you go to Input. So new stuff. We have action mappings and axis mappings. Actions are binary, on or off, buttons, mouse clicks, etc. Axes are analog, like sticks or rudders or joysticks or steering wheels or whatever. We won't bother with the advanced stuff. So we're going to have a new action. So you click the plus, and then a drop down appears, and we're just going to call it grab because that is the action. Now next to grab, I'm going to bind two keys. One is going to be, just to show that we can do more than two, one is going to be, say, the left shift. Now you might as well just search for it. Oops, that was very unfortunate. Okay, left shift, there we go. And then we will also look for the mouse button and the right mouse button. So either right mouse button or left shift will map to an action that we're calling grab, and you need to spell it in the code exactly like this. So that's it. And this is the type of stuff that the player can control if you give them access to it in a menu system, for example, by the way. This is where you remap your keys. So two mappings to one action. Okay, so just come out of there once your binding is set up like that, or use whatever keys you want. So over in our begin play, we already have the code that goes and looks for the attached input component. What we want to do next, instead of logging out, or as well as logging out, we can bind the input axis. Now, what does that mean? Well, let me show you. We go input component, which is the component we found. Now, what is that? It's a pointer, right? So we use our arrow operator. Bind action, sorry if I said axis, bind action. We're going to bind an action to a method. So let's look at this function one thing at a time. Constant fname action name, what is that? Well, it's just grab. That's what we used. It's got to be spelled exactly the same as we set up in the input panel. Okay, what next? Well, next we need an input event. It's an enumerator, and we want a bit of press, about pressing the button. So you've got IE, i.e. input event, pressed. Okay, there's another one for released as well, by the way. So up next is the object that this is going to operate on. We're going to use this, which is a reference to the component itself, the grabber component. Okay, so when we push a key that is mapped to grab, so when we push, I'm highlighting the words as I go, the key that is mapped to grab, or either of the keys in this case, then we look for a method on this, which is the grabber. And then finally, what's the method name? Now, the signature of this is horrible. Look at it. It's a horribly complicated signature. So I'm not going to go into detail about what all these generic syntax means right now. Well, what you do need here is you need to point to a function, which doesn't exist yet. So the function is going to be just simply called grab. So how do we specify it? That's the question. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to specify it, and then in the next lecture, I'm going to talk a little bit about why we specified it that name, and then, well, that way rather, and then we'll go on to use it. So the way that you do it is you need a reference, and then we fully qualify i.e. uGrabber is the class, and then the method name is grab. And you just leave it like that without any brackets around it. That is just qualifying the method name. So it's just complaining because uGrabber grab doesn't exist. Let's make grab. And I think for now it needs to be, it can be private, that's fine. It can be void, grab, and it's a method. So that's all there is. And I will actually comment this one. It's start, well, raycast and grab what's in reach is what grab is actually going to do. So void grab, okay? And then we actually define grab over here. So void uGrabber, because that's the class name, just like any method we define here, grab. Okay, and then it's going to do something. And what it's going to do was was commented over here in the header file. Raycast and grab what's in reach. So this method will get called. That's what we're doing here. We are providing the address of, which is the address of operator, the grabber. Okay, so we'll go into that in a little bit more detail in the next video to keep this one at a reasonable length. But that is how you bind the grab component. Okay, let's just see it in action. Let's do a quick log, and then we'll leave this video. And we will challenge you to do the other bit. Let's copy this log file here. And just say it's a warning, just so it's yellow. Text. Grab pressed. Okay, so let's see this in action with a final closing bracket. Let's go to Unreal, check it compiles. Play it. Now let's click the right-hand mouse button, grab pressed, or the left shift, grab pressed. Okay, so I'll leave you with this code on the screen. You can hopefully see what's going on there. As I say, a little bit more detail in the next lecture. But we are binding any key that maps to grab when it's pressed. We look at this, which is the grabber, and we look for a method called grab. And this is an address of operator. So it effectively jumps to this method when we push a key.